Rule changes are coming, and big rule changes. We're not going to have any more huge defensive shifts, and there's going to be a pitch clock, and that is all official coming for 2023. We're going to have our reaction next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. And where we start is with the big news of the day, which is that these rule changes, long speculated about, and I think a large percentage of people thought that these were already official, but they were not. Big rule changes. We're going to have a pitch clock in Major League Baseball in 2023 and for the foreseeable future, probably for the rest of the history of the sport. And we're also going to have a ban on big shifts. And so we're going to get into what the rules are and what the ramifications are and my opinion about these rules. And we'll also get into Sean Hjelle and his big relief appearance. He went 5 innings in relief and was very good, and also a bunch more kind of roster moves on the horizon for the Giants. So we'll get into all of that later. But I think the big news are these changes, which to me, I'm just going to start by saying I was very much against changes like this years ago. When I first started podcasting back in 2015 with Adam Petke, talking about the Giants and talking about Major League Baseball, we were against these types of rule changes, but I've come around because of a number of reasons. For the pitch timer, I've seen it in action in the minor leagues, and simply put, games have gotten longer over the last several decades, a lot longer. They've gained, 30 minutes, I think, on average, and it's been studied, and the reason the games are getting longer is simply that there's more time in between pitches. So it is just dead time when nothing is happening. So there are some, arguments against this, and the arguments are there's no clock in baseball, and then you're adding a clock. But at the same time, think about it in extremes. I always go to extremes with these rules, and at a certain point, you've got to throw the pitch, right? At a certain point, it becomes too long to wait. And I think that pitchers have pushed beyond what's reasonable, and hitters. They step out every pitch, not to rag on a guy, but for example, Joey Bart would step out every single pitch and take off his hand guard and then put it back on and strap it on and then call time, step in the box, get ready, look at the pitcher. It's just too long in between pitches. And if you're trying to bring in new fans and even keep the fans you have, I think a crisper pace, it's really hard for me to sit here and say you're going to find this to be a negative. I think that this is going to be an overwhelming positive for the game. And, you probably won't even notice. The thing is, they'll get in the rhythm, and then it'll just be normal to pick up the pace. And the clock, it's not a timer on, I think when people say there's no clock in baseball, what you really kind of mean is that you can always make a comeback because there's no time limit. You can, as long as you have outs remaining, you're still in the game. But this doesn't take that away. You just have to get in the box. And if you're a pitcher, you just have to get on the rubber and throw a pitch. And so there's potential injury concerns. That's a whole separate argument. I'm not an expert on that in terms of letting pitchers recover in between pitches and if you force them to throw. But really, it might just kind of make them not throw as hard, which could increase offense. So anyway, let me get into the specifics of the rule now that I started with my opinion of it. So the pitch timer, I'm going to kind of read MLB trade rumors right up here. They say a pitch timer will improve pace of play and reduce dead time. The pitch timer regulations include the following provisions. A pitcher must begin his motion before the expiration of the timer. Pitchers will have up to 15 seconds between pitches with at least I jumped a line. 15 seconds between pitches when the bases are empty, and up to 20 seconds between pitches with at least one runner on base. Testing in the minor leagues involved 14 seconds with the bases empty and 18 seconds, 19 in AAA, with at least one runner on base. Pitcher may disengage the rubber. There's all these kind of fine details, including pickoffs. You're limited on pickoffs. You can disengage the rubber twice per plate appearance with no penalty. Subsequent disengagements will result in a balk unless an out is recorded on the runner. So essentially, you can make 2 pickoff throws, but after that, you can't make a pickoff throw unless you get the guy out. If you make a pickoff throw and he's safe again, then it's a balk and he gets to go to second. So that's a big deal that this is a rule now. It's, I think, going to increase stolen bases. There's a lot of ramifications here, and there are all these fine details about a hitter and how many times a hitter can call timeout. The hitter must be in the box and alert to the pitcher with at least 8 seconds remaining on the timer. And a hitter receives 1 timeout per plate appearance. Umpires have the authority to provide additional time if warranted by special circumstances. And okay, the results in the minor leagues. Compared to last season, the pitch timer reduced the average 9-inning game time by 26 minutes from 3 hours and 4 minutes in 2021 to 2 hours and 38 minutes in 2022, while increasing action on the field. Stolen base attempts per game have increased from 2.23 in 2019 at a 68% success rate to 2.83 in 2022 with a 77% success rate. In its most recent week of play, minor league baseball has averaged just 0.45 pitch timer violations per game. So it does happen, and it sometimes is an ugly thing. Like, you see a strikeout because of a pitch timer violation. I don't really like the optics of that. I would prefer that you don't have these violations, but that's really the only way to enforce the rule is you have to have a penalty. So the penalty, I should say, I don't think I even read it there. I didn't see them write it, is that if the pitcher violates the pitch timer, it's an automatic ball. And if the hitter violates the pitch timer, it's an automatic strike, even if it's ball 4, even if it's strike 3. So I don't love that, but it's hard to say what else the penalty should be. And of course, there's also this penalty for pitchers that can result in a balk, meaning runners will get to advance. And so, man, like in the playoffs, I don't know, maybe they should increase it by a couple seconds in the postseason just to avoid, I really don't want to see a World Series end on a pitch timer violation by way of example. Again, I like to think in extremes. So the other rule here, there's bigger bases is another thing. We'll touch on that. But the other major change here is defensive shift restrictions. And so the write-up per MLB Trade Rumors says, a set of restrictions will return the game to a more traditional aesthetic by governing defensive shifts with the goal of encouraging more balls in play, giving players more opportunities to showcase their athleticism, and offsetting a growing trend of alignments that feature 4 outfielders. Lateral positioning. 2 infielders must be positioned on each side of second base when the pitch is released. Depth. All 4 infielders must have both feet within the outer boundary of the infield when the pitcher is on the rubber. No switching sides. Infielders may not switch sides unless there is a substitution. Key stat. Defensive alignments that feature 4 players in the outfield increased nearly 6 times across MLB since the start of the 2018 season. So this is another big one for a totally different set of reasons. But, I mean, just imagine. These days, the shift is just completely dominant. Like, you see it on every play pretty much. And especially shifting into right field. Like, you have a third baseman who shifts over to the other side and plays in the outfield, essentially. And so you hit a ball that used to be a hit between the first baseman and the second baseman, but there's always somebody standing there against a left-handed hitter, especially. Pick it up, throw him out. Like, those hits got taken away. So this is the first I'm seeing that you have to stay on your side. You can't even switch. That makes sense given that you can't move into the grass anyway. But, you know, those are like a ground out to third base in the scorecard, right? And we had some Manny Machado was shifted way over like that and catching balls in the air that were in the right field corner. He's a third baseman, and you write it as a fly out to the third baseman, even though he caught it like near the right field wall. Didn't make any sense. And so this is going to bring a little bit of sanity back to scorekeeping at least. So anyway, coming up in just a minute, we're going to continue to elaborate on this and eventually talk about the lots of roster movement with the San Francisco Giants. But first, guys, we all know that confidence can take you far in life. That's especially true in the bedroom, especially when it's time to step up to the plate. That's where Blue Chew comes in. Blue Chew is a unique online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra and Cialis, but in chewable tablets and at a fraction of the cost. You can take them anytime, day or night, so you can plan ahead or be ready whenever the opportunity arises. The process is simple. Sign up at bluechew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. The best part, it's all done online, so no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversations, and no waiting in line at the pharmacy. Blue Chew's tablets are made in the United States and prepared and shipped direct to your door in a discreet package. So if you could benefit from extra confidence when it's time to perform, chew it and do it. And we've got a special deal for our listeners. Try Blue Chew free when you use the promo code LOCKEDON at checkout. Just pay $5 for shipping. That's bluechew.com, promo code LOCKEDON to receive your first month free. Visit bluechew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring the podcast. All right, as promised, elaboration on these rules and just kind of my opinion now on the banning of the defensive shift. So again, this is something that I was vehemently against not many years ago. Vehemently against. You can probably find an old podcast of me talking about why I think this is a horrible idea. But the more I get older, I don't know what it is. Maybe when you're younger, you just don't want, well, it's usually the opposite, right? When you get older, you're kind of set in your ways. But it's, for me, maybe it's like getting older and being set in the way that baseball used to be. And I don't want all these newfangled changes. But no, like when I was 6, 7, 8 years ago, it was that this was like analytics coming into the game. And I didn't want to stifle the teams that were smarter than other teams by realizing that positioning your players a little bit different than it's been done for 130 years. I didn't want to say, you can't do that and reward the teams that were not willing to advance. That's what it felt like. But these days, every team has reached that level. And so it's no longer some sort of huge advantage that you're shifting because everybody's shifting. Yes, there are teams that are better than others. And in fact, there was an article, I didn't even read it, intended to, but never got around to it, talking about which teams position their fielders the best. And the cover photo was the Giants. And I believe the Giants are the team that is known to position their players the best on the field. And that includes in the infield, of course, and shifting guys. So this could hurt the Giants more than most teams. That being said, I have come around to the idea that the game is just better off and generally was intended to be that the players were kind of spread evenly around. And it's gotten so good, the shifts have gotten so good that there's always somebody standing where you're hitting the ball, especially on the ground. Like ground balls have just become absolute death and you cannot hit the ball on the ground. Otherwise you're hitting it right to someone almost all the time. And also I think that fielder in shallow right field is particularly problematic for left-handed hitters. It's like a line drive to the outfield and they're out because there's somebody standing there. It's really, really hard to hit. Pitchers have gotten better in general and the shifting. So it became too difficult to get hits. And if you look at offense this year, numbers are down in a big way. I mean, the league average batting average has not been lower in quite a while. I mean, it's like 242 is the league average batting average. And I think that banning the shifts will probably tick that number up meaningfully. I don't know quite how much. I know some people have studied this far more than I have, but it also brings back the importance of defense at various positions, like second base specifically, because you could kind of have a less mobile second baseman if they're just backed way up. and range becomes less important. But if you're brought in, it becomes more important. For those of you who've been watching baseball for several decades, you remember when rangy second basemen were a thing. And these days you don't really see that as much because they're deeper. But if you're on the dirt, think of a ball up the middle where you've got to kind of backhand it and do the Jeter jump throw. We don't really see that out of the second base position anymore, but this would bring that back. So when we look at the Giants and a lot of their immobile fielders, it affects them, and it actually might affect the value of someone like Wilmer Flores, because he has played a lot of second base this year, but if he's forced to be on the dirt, I think that his value goes down. And Tommy La Stella, I mean, my goodness, he can barely play as it is. And in fact, I mean, he DHs most of the time anyway. And yeah, I mean, it changes things in a major way. And I think I'm just for it because a lot of the trends in the game have led to like diminished offense and also the slower pace. And so these things really address that. I do just want to kind of point out how this happened. In the new collective bargaining agreement, which was why we had a lockout, because they were working on this and it took a while, but they ultimately agreed, right? The players and the league agreed to a new collective bargaining agreement. And in the agreement, this rules committee, it's made up of a majority of representatives of the league, okay? And then they can pass through new rules by a simple majority vote. And so the players agreed to this, okay? But what this means is that the league has the authority to simply implement whatever it wants in terms of rules changes. At the same time, there are players on the committee, and there is an umpire on the committee, or a representative of the umpires. I'm assuming it's an actual umpire and actual players who are on the committee. But I think it's like 6 league members and 4 players plus an umpire is what I'm trying to say. So the league has the edge and they can push anything through, but at the same time, the players and the umpires are there and involved in the discussions. So what we've heard is that the league representatives voted unanimously for the pitch timer and the shift banning, and the players voted against it. I don't think we heard what the umpire voted for, but while they may have voted against it, they also elected to have this be the system where they knew that the league would be able to push this through. So I think voting against it is kind of more for just having that mentality of being obstructionists and having the narrative that they don't see eye to eye, and it's something they can use and try to say that the league pushed something through without their consent. But they consented to the system that made it so they had virtually no power to do anything about it. So I don't really... Here's the thing. I think the players they tend to object to pretty much anything that is new and rules changes and all that, rule changes. But in the minor leagues, this stuff has been a huge success, and it has people who've seen it and played with it, they really like it. And for me, the next thing is the automated strike zone. We heard there was some report that it wasn't going to be this year. So as much as I hate not having an automated strike zone, I think that we are potentially looking at this coming into the game, maybe starting in 2024. And I'm willing to wait because I'm going to be a fan forever. And so, I'd like it to be sooner, but as long as we eventually get the automated strike zone, then I'm okay with it, as long as it's kind of soon. But I just want to say what we think the automated strike zone will look like, and what I think is possibly the best way to do it, is that you can quickly challenge calls, and you only get a few per game. And this is what they're experimenting with. They're experimenting with just every call being automated and with the challenge system. And the problem with every call being automated is it completely takes away the aesthetic of framing. And so you've got catchers, they can just catch it willy-nilly, not make any attempt to present the pitch. And I think it just doesn't look good to see that. Versus if you have to frame the pitch because you're going to get the call from the umpire, they're not going to challenge a borderline call necessarily. They're only going to challenge the egregious calls. And so, or a borderline call in a big situation. And just like in tennis, they do the challenge and it's really fast. Comes up on the screen, comes up on the board in the arena, and they show the ball and the line, and then boom, call is done and it's either a strike or a ball and you move on. So I think that, and it can be fun, right? To be a fan and the excitement of seeing the call and seeing that it's a ball versus just called every time. So anyway, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. There's also going to be bigger bases. That's actually happening. And this is like a safety issue, just more room for the players to kind of slide into and touch as they're running to first and whatever. So also slightly narrows the distance between bases, so you can maybe increase steals a little bit that way. So coming up in just a minute, we're going to get into the roster moves for the Giants. Sean Hjelle with a really nice relief performance as the Giants were swept in the doubleheader yesterday, and then more roster movement today ahead of this game in Wrigley Field. But first, BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your pro and college football betting needs and sports info this season. Find all the latest football league developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts, including this year's opening week games. BetOnline is also your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MLB, don't forget about us, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, as promised, a lot of Giants activity. We talked yesterday about what to be watching for with the Giants the rest of the season, and we mentioned, of course, David VR. We mentioned how Sean Hjelle was on the taxi squad, and so it's guys like that who are what make the rest of the season worth watching if you're a Giants fan, and they have not been afraid to be pretty aggressive with giving various guys opportunities. So in this doubleheader, it didn't go well for the Giants. They got swept. David VR didn't have a particularly good day. So in a lot of ways, it was a very disappointing couple of games for the Giants. But the one guy who stood out was Sean Hjelle, who went 5 innings in relief, struck out 6. Fastball velocity was up to the mid-90s, even touched, I think, 96. So Hjelle, it looks like, may have been optioned today, but I didn't see an official announcement of that yet, which I would hope that he would continue to get looks based on the way that he pitched in this game. So 6'11" pitcher. I think the issue, and they've been discussing it, is that he tends to lose his velocity the deeper he goes into the game, and that if he can maintain mid-90s, it's a very different dynamic for him. So he's got this really good sinker. He's been able to get a ground ball rate of 59.4% here in his brief major league career. In the minors this year is 57%. So that is way above average. The league average rate in the major leagues is in the low 40s for ground balls. And Hjelle has also been able to strike people out amazingly, like way more than he struck guys out in the minors. So it is probably adrenaline related. He seems to be a guy who really wants to be here and prove that he belongs. And I'm a little bit annoyed that they're not just giving him more of an opportunity. Seems like they're sending him out. There are these option rules. You can only be optioned, 5 times per season now? Because guys have the number of option years, and then within each option year, there's now a limit to how many times you can be sent up and down. So I don't think Hjelle is getting close to that. But still, by sending him down, they can't call him up for... It used to be 10 days. Is it 15 days now? I need to clarify that. But we're probably not going to see Hjelle unless there's an injury for a little while. And he's probably not going to make a start coming up here in short order, even though Alex Wood is on the injured list. But that's based on, I'm seeing on the transactions page for the Giants that they sent him back to Sacramento. But I didn't see anything tweeted about that from any of the reporters there in Chicago. Actually, we're just getting an update right now, and it looks like there's no update on Sean Hjelle, but Dominic Leone goes to the 15-day IL, and Austin Dean selected from Sacramento. Yermin Mercedes cleared waivers and was outrighted to Sacramento. Andrew Knapp also cleared waivers and was outrighted to Sacramento. So we didn't know that Yermin Mercedes had been DFA'd, but he was DFA'd and cleared waivers. So he's now off the 40-man is what that means. And so is Andrew Knapp, who was just briefly on it. And so that's how they're able to add Austin Dean, was the Mercedes. Because we knew about Knapp already. He was DFA'd to get somebody, Bart, I think, back onto the roster. But man, all the roster moves that the Giants make, it has made this job far more complex than it used to be, but it is my job to be on top of it. But regardless, there was an open spot for Austin Dean. And so Austin Dean is now on the 40-man and in the lineup today against the Chicago Cubs. Dean is an outfielder. He has been pretty solid in Sacramento, although overall a below average hitter for AAA Sacramento, although he's got 16 homers, 9 steals, and has been caught just twice and is a good defensive outfielder as well. And so looking forward to seeing all these new guys play and see who can be a part of the future of this team. Also, Cole Waits, a reliever, is on the taxi squad in Chicago. He started the season in high A and made it all the way to AAA and now all the way to the major leagues potentially. Being on the taxi squad means you haven't actually been added to the roster, but you're on the cusp. And so big fastball for Cole Waits. It is graded by Fangraphs as a 70 on the 20 to 80 scale. And everywhere he's gone, he's had strikeout rates of 40% or more this season, including over 50% when he was in high A. So big fastball out of Cole Waits. And if I had to guess, I would say we'll probably see him at some point in the next few days. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. Now make your second listen the Locked On MLB podcast. MLB expert Paul Francis Sullivan brings humor, passion, and unique perspective on every team and the biggest stories around the league. Follow the #1 daily league-wide podcast Locked On MLB on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. Helps me out a ton, so thanks in advance, and thank you to everyone who's done so already. Can't wait to be with you again on Monday. We're going to have lots of updates from all these new and young potential future Giants. So we'll be back then. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.